A grieving single dad and his daughter revive a forgotten ranch with quiet courage. But who is the woman that owns that land? And can healing truly offer second chances? Now, if you believe in stories that heal and remind us of the power of second chances, subscribe and join a community where kindness always finds a way home. The snow fell like a hush in the sky, soft as breath, quiet as regret. It didn't swirl or scream, just drifted steady, like it knew exactly where to land. The ranch sat low in the valley, forgotten by time, its fences leaning like tired men, and its fields grown wild with winter weeds. There was a silence to the place, not the kind you noticed, but the kind that noticed you. Jack Wilder stepped out of the old pickup with one boot, then the other, his breath rising in white puffs as he took in the land. He'd seen better places. Hell, he'd left better places. But something about this broken acreage called to him, the way a half-written letter still begs to be read. His daughter, Sadie, hopped down after him, too light for her footsteps to crunch much snow. She wore that red scarf her mother knit the year before cancer showed up with its slow erasure. She didn't speak, just looked around with those wide, watchful eyes of hers, the kind that saw more than any grown man ever did. The wind caught her scarf and tugged it like a ghost. Jack didn't say much. He never did. Words hadn't fixed anything in a long time. He just laid a rough hand on Sadie's shoulder and nodded toward the barn, what was left of it. One wall bowed inward, the roof sagging like a tired spine. Still, it was shelter, and shelter was enough for now. They slept on hay that night, curled up like wolves under an old army blanket. The barn creaked and breathed with them, would expanding and settling like a memory, trying to make room. Jack listened to the wind moving through the broken slats and wondered what kind of fool took a job fixing a ranch with no clear owner, just a P.O. box and a key left taped to the back of a help wanted sign. But work was work, and Sadie needed someplace still. Come morning, Jack found the fence line with one post still standing, bare, proud, and stubborn, like the land refused to forget itself. He started there. The days moved like molasses. Jack fixed what he could. He used his own tools when the ones provided snapped in the cold. He cleared brush, patched up the chicken coop, even though there were no chickens. Each nail he drove and felt like it might hold something more than wood, something older, deeper. Sadie started leaving her drawings inside the barn, little pages tacked up with rusty nails. Hawks, storm clouds, a woman with a braid down her back. Jack didn't ask. She didn't offer, but the woman's face looked familiar in a way that didn't make sense. Sometimes Jack saw her too, a figure on horseback just beyond the trees, smoke trailing behind like a second shadow. Never close, never speaking, just watching. She'd vanished before he could wave. Maybe she wasn't real, or maybe she was just what the land remembered. Evenings came early and cold. Jack would light a fire in the barn's old stove, and Sadie would read aloud from a worn-out book her mother used to love. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. Jack pretended to whittle or sort nails, but his hand stilled every time Sadie reached the end of a chapter and looked up like she wanted the world to be a little gentler. On the sixth night, a pie appeared on the porch, still warm. No note, just a scent of cinnamon and something else. Something quiet. Jack stared at it for a long time. He didn't touch it until Sadie smiled and said, "It smells like Christmas." He didn't know why that broke him a little, but he nodded and whispered, "Yeah, it does." He never saw who left it, but from then on, there was always something. A thermos of soup, a hand-stitched mitten, a bundle of dry kindling wrapped in twine. Each gift carried a silence, so tender it made the cold feel less cruel. Weeks passed. Jack began to speak more, mostly to Sadie, sometimes to the land. He'd curse at the tractor, laugh when a stubborn nail bent his hammer, hum low when the sun caught the barn roof just right. The place wasn't alive yet, but it was waking. He could feel it. One morning, he found a note tacked to the lone standing fence post, the same one he started with. The paper was thick, folded twice, the ink a deep blue that bled slightly at the edges. You're doing more than repairs. Don't stop. E. No name, just that one letter, and it said more than a paragraph ever could. Jack read it 3 times, said nothing, but when he handed it to Sadie, she pressed it against her heart like a prayer. And that night, when she went to bed, he stayed up by the stove, holding the note like it might catch fire and reveal something truer underneath. He didn't sleep. Instead, he stepped outside, snow crunching soft under his boots, breath clouding around him. The stars blinked above like they were remembering him. He looked out over the dark fields and whispered, "You're not just land, are you?" Somewhere, a hawk cried in the night. The frost had thickened. Morning sunlight came slower now, as if hesitant to touch the valley. Each window on the old ranch house stayed, misted long after dawn, and the chimney rarely stopped breathing. The land didn't speak, but it listened, and the wind, when it stirred, carried the faintest trace of smoke and apples. Jack Wilder stood by the broken well pump, sleeve rolled and wrench in hand, steam rising from his breath. His fingers ached in the cold, but he didn't complain. The silence was better than most company anyway. Sadie sat nearby on a hay bale, legs swinging, humming softly to herself as she worked on another drawing. This one had a hawk again, its wings outstretched over a wide field of snow. Beneath it stood the woman with the braid, always faceless, always still. Jack caught glimpses of her, too, real or not, a flicker between trees, a hoofbeat vanishing into wind. Once, he saw her crouch by the orchard, touching the ground like she was listening for something beneath it. He called out. She didn't flinch, just rose and rode away without looking back. He didn't tell Sadie, but she already knew. "She's watching to see if we stay," the girl had said one evening, without lifting her eyes from the page. "She thinks the land might like us." That stuck with Jack longer than he'd admit. The pie came again, this time with a small clay jar of honey wrapped in red cloth. There was no note, but the cloth smelled faintly of cedar and something like lavender. Jack folded it slowly, thumb trailing the seam like it might spell out her name. He placed it in the drawer with the letter from the fence post. He didn't know what to call her, but he thought of her as Eve, not Evelyn, not Mississippi, just Eve, like the first breath of something new. The days kept slow rhythm. Jack kept working, fixing the old cattle gate, rebuilding the porch rail. He wasn't in a hurry. The place didn't reward speed. It asked for patience, like a wounded animal testing your hands. One dusk, as the sky went bruised purple, Sadie tugged his sleeve and pointed toward the east fence. Jack looked, and there she was, Eve, kneeling in the grass, fingers buried in soil that hadn't grown a thing in years. He walked halfway, then stopped. She didn't move. "You left us honey," he said, voice low, like he didn't want to scare the air. She stood and faced him. Sunlight caught her braid, and for a second she looked carved from amber and dust. No smile, no words, just a slow nod, like rain tipping off the edge of a branch. Then she turned and rode off again. That night, Jack wrote a letter, not to send, just to feel something settle. Who are you? Why this ranch? Why us? And why does it feel like you're putting it back together, from the edges in? He folded the paper and placed it under his pillow. He didn't tell Sadie. But the next morning, the letter was gone. In its place, a fresh bundle of fence nails, tied in red cloth. Sadie fell ill not long after, a fever that rose fast, sharp, and mean. Jack sat by her through the night, sweat dampening her curls as she murmured in half-sleep. He read to her, sang poorly, whispered things her mother used to say. When he stepped outside to fetch more water, he found a bottle of penicillin on the porch, wrapped in an old linen handkerchief. No note, just a bottle, just a name on the label in delicate, looping ink. Sadie Wilder. He wept then, quiet, hunched, one hand pressed to his eyes like he could stop the ache from leaking out. She stayed near after that. Eve. He never saw her arrive, only the traces she left. A mended gate latch, a stack of fresh firewood, a line of sage burned and left in a horseshoe shape on the windowsill. Sadie called her the land's memory. Jack called her a mystery. But deep down he understood. She'd been here long before them. And maybe she was trying to see if they could carry something forward. One evening, after the fever broke, Jack found her again, by the stream, hands washing something in silence. He approached slower this time, boots scuffing rock. "You always leave before I can say thank you." She didn't look up. "I don't do it for thanks," she said. Her voice was low, even, like river stones under shallow water. "I don't even know your name," he said. She lifted her eyes, dark, clear, and unreadable. "You don't need to yet." He swallowed. "Why us?" Eve stood slowly, her hands wet and red from berries. "Because the land listens, and you haven't lied to it." She started to walk away, then paused. "I bought this ranch for someone who might love it like my father did. I just didn't know who until I saw your daughter plant a wildflower by the well." She vanished into trees again. Jack stood there long after the sound of hooves had faded. He touched the wet stone she'd left behind, flat, oval, and warm to the touch though the night had turned cold. Inside it, a tiny fossil, a spiral, something ancient turned to stone. He placed it on Sadie's nightstand. She curled toward it in sleep, one hand resting against the pillow like it held dreams too fragile for light. That night, Jack lit a candle beside the fire and unfolded every cloth, every note, every gift she'd left. He laid them out like clues or prayers. And at the center, he placed the first letter. "You're doing more than repairs. Don't stop." He stared at the handwriting. The slight tilt in the D, the fading curve at the E, like someone once taught her to write gently, even when she was angry. He smiled for the first time in days. Outside, a hawk circled overhead, cutting slow arcs against the rising stars. And somewhere in the barn, the kettle sang low. The first sign came quietly, just a patch of green pushing through the frost near the south fence. A tuft of grass, trembling in morning light, stubborn and soft as breath. Jack noticed it while replacing a hinge on the old chicken coop, the metal biting at his fingers, rust giving way like old resentment. He paused, squinting at the little bloom of color. It wasn't much, but it was something. Later that day, he found Sadie kneeling beside it, gloves off, her small hands cupped around the sprout like it was a secret. She didn't speak, just smiled without teeth, tired, but healing. Jack crouched beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I think it likes you," he said. Sadie looked up. "No," she whispered. "It likes us." The ranch began to breathe after that, not in great, gasping gulps, but in steady exhales, slow, rhythmic, like something asleep was beginning to stir. A hawk circled more often now, its wings cutting clean lines through the sky. Eve came less often, but when she did, she stayed longer, sometimes sitting on the porch steps beside Jack in silence, sometimes helping Sadie plant flower seeds along the fence. No names exchanged, no explanations needed. One morning, Jack found her near the orchard with pruning shears in one hand and a weathered photo in the other. She didn't notice him at first. He spoke gently, like approaching a horse. "Yours." She looked at the photo. 2 children beneath a blooming apple tree, laughter captured in faded gray. "My brother and me," she said. Jack nodded, eyes on the orchard. "Looks like that tree hasn't bloomed since." Eve blinked slowly. "Not until this year." They didn't say anything more. That evening, Jack added a new rail to the porch. He carved initials into the wood, when no one was looking, J, S, and a third letter he didn't finish. The next morning, someone had carved the last stroke, E. No words passed between them, but their silence grew roots. By early April, the land had softened. Calves were born strong-legged and steady. Sadie named them all. "You can't name something if you don't plan to keep it," Jack had warned once, half-hearted. But Sadie only looked up and said, "Then I guess we're staying." Jack built a chicken coop, though there were still no chickens. He repaired the windmill, even though it hadn't turned in years. Some days it did now, just a little. He started planting wildflowers around the barn, red and purple ones, like the ones he remembered from his mother's old garden. The same garden he'd torn apart with grief after burying his wife. The same hands that had destroyed now pressed seeds gently into soil. Eve watched him from a distance. She didn't speak, but once she left behind a pouch of marigold seeds beside a folded note. Some flowers only bloom when they think they're being forgotten, but they never really are, Jack. He folded that note into the lining of his coat and carried it everywhere. The town began to notice. A bag of oats left at the gate. A local girl offering to teach Sadie piano. The school bus driver stopping just a little longer. Jack nodded thanks, but never asked why. The land was changing. Maybe they were too. Then came Miles Garrick. He showed up in a pressed shirt and a heavy belt buckle, all teeth and paperwork. "This ranch doesn't belong to you," he said, squinting at Jack like he was made of mistakes. "I never said it did," Jack replied. Miles slapped a legal notice against the barn door, hard enough to make Sadie flinch. "I know who used to own this land," Miles said, "and I know what it's worth now." He left a dust trail behind him that took hours to settle. Jack read the notice by lamplight, hands trembling. The words blurred. A formal claim. Allegations of trespassing. Mention of mineral rights. Threats of eviction. Sadie sat quiet beside the stove. Her drawing that day was a hawk with torn wings. When Jack turned to find Eve, she was gone. No footprints. No gifts. No notes. Just absence. For the first time, Jack felt the barn breathe heavy around him. Like the walls missed her too. He stayed up that night, not fixing, not pacing, just waiting. But she didn't come. In the days that followed, he tried to hide the tension. He built more, fixed what it needed fixing. He told Sadie stories from before, when her mother danced barefoot in the hallway, when he played guitar badly, when the world hadn't fallen apart. Sadie listened with wide eyes and said, "I think Mama would have liked the hawk woman." Jack didn't answer. The court date came too fast. Jack dressed in a shirt with stiff buttons and boots too polished. He held Sadie's hand in the hallway outside the small-town courtroom. She was too small for the bench, her legs swinging again, just like they had by the barn that first day. Inside, Jack spoke quietly. He told the judge about the work he'd done, about the gifts left behind, about the healing land. He didn't name Eve. He couldn't, but Sadie did. She pulled a folded drawing from her coat pocket and walked up on trembling legs. "This is a ranch," she said. "It used to be gray. But then the hawk lady came, and it started turning gold." The judge smiled at her gently, but the law wasn't built on drawings. "Do you have any proof of ownership?" the judge asked Jack. Jack shook his head. "No, just stewardship." The courtroom quieted. The judge leaned back. "Then we'll need to hear from the landowner." Jack's throat tightened. He looked at the doorway one last time, like a boy waiting on a parent who promised they'd show. But she wasn't there. Only silence. Only stillness. He took Sadie's hand and turned to leave, heart heavy, boots echoing. But just before they stepped out, the door creaked open, and there she stood, Eve, coat dusted with road, braid over one shoulder, boots quiet on the tile. "I'm here," she said. The rain came slow and steady, like a memory returning home. Not harsh, not loud, just soft enough to tap the courthouse windows with rhythm, to dampen the dust rising off the roads, to make the earth sigh and turn its face upward. Jack stood still as the door closed behind her. Eve, coat clinging to her shoulders, hair damp at the ends, boots wet but sure as she stepped forward. She didn't look at Jack, not yet. Her eyes held to the judge's with a kind of calm that came only from carrying something heavy for far too long. "I'm the owner of the Wilder Ranch," she said. Her voice held steady. "Not proud, not performative. Just truth, finally spoken. The courtroom didn't breathe. Jack's fingers tightened around Sadie's hand, his pulse loud in his ears. She looked up at him with the quiet kind of hope only children can hold on to after disappointment has already knocked once. The judge nodded slowly. "Name, ma'am?" She met his gaze. Evelyn Ray. A few in the room flinched at the name, like it had echoed off their family trees and old debts. Evelyn stepped closer. "My father lost this land before I was old enough to fight for it, but I spent the last 10 years buying it back, under trust aliases, shell companies. I learned their game so I could win with their rules." She pulled a folder from her coat. It landed on the desk with a soft slap. Deeds, maps, every signature. And one from Mr. Garrick, 30 years ago, coerced and notarized under false witness. Miles Garrick shifted in his seat, suddenly smaller than he'd ever seemed. The judge turned to him, brow tightening. But Evelyn didn't wait for justice to catch up. "This land isn't just mine because of ink or inheritance. It's mine because I never left it, because I remembered it when everyone else forgot." She looked finally at Jack. "And I found someone who loves it back." No one spoke. The judge leaned forward. "And what do you intend to do with the property now that you've made your claim?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her coat one last time. A small, folded letter. Yellowed. Handwritten. She placed it on the table. Jack recognized it. The one he'd written by candlelight. The one he'd tucked under his pillow and thought had vanished. "I came looking for someone who would write words like these," Evelyn said. "Who wouldn't ask for a deed before planting seeds? Who didn't need to own something to protect it?" She turned back to Jack, softer now. "I'm placing the land in trust for the Wilder family. Jack and Sadie." Jack blinked, lips parting, breath caught in his throat. "I don't want to own it," he said. "Not if it means losing what brought it back to life." Evelyn stepped closer. "You won't. You'll just be its heartbeat." Sadie leaned her head against Jack's hip. "Does that mean we're staying?" Evelyn knelt beside her, voice gentle. "It means this land already knows your name." Outside, the rain turned to mist. Light filtered in through the window, silver and soft, like spring tried to decide if it would stay. By the end of the week, Garrick was gone, his trucks, his claims, his bitterness scattered like dry leaves. And by the end of the month, the orchard bloomed again. Evelyn moved into the old ranch house, but not alone. Jack built a porch swing by hand. Sadie painted the barn door with stars. The hawk still circled, a silent witness. One morning, as they all sat on the steps with coffee and cocoa in hand, Evelyn handed Jack a small, wrapped box. Inside was a carved porch rail with their initials, J.S.E., now sanded smooth and sealed with linseed oil. She'd saved it without telling him. He turned it over in his hands, thumb brushing the grooves. "You think the land remembers us?" he asked. Evelyn leaned her shoulder against his. It never forgot. A breeze lifted through the tall grass, carrying the scent of apple blossoms and wet wood. Sadie chased it, arms wide, laughter trailing behind her like ribbon. Jack watched her, then turned to Evelyn. "You staying?" She didn't answer with words, just took his hand and didn't let go. If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from. These stories matter.